One of the moments that stuck with me the most from Island is that bittersweet instant when the winners were announced. Instead of seeing faces full of joy and excitement, what appeared were expressions of sadness, pain, and mixed emotions. To me, that perfectly sums up what Island was. Not long ago, I rewatched Island, and this time I managed to catch details that I had previously overlooked. I realized that this program was filled with emotions, intense friendships, clashes, happy moments, and painful situations. The fact that the participants lived together 24/7 made it feel like a true reality show, where emotions blossomed much more than in an ordinary survival program. That's why I wanted to take you through the narrative built within Island, whether there were really villains or heroes, whether some were favored or overlooked, and how fair the decisions truly were. Of course, everything you'll read here is only my perspective, not an absolute truth. I'll also focus on key points of the show, especially the ENG members, who had greater prominence, along with a few other important participants. I also think it's important to clarify that when talking about these topics, we need to keep things in perspective. I don't dislike or hate any of the participants. These are not hate messages. But before diving into the analysis, first, for those who haven't seen it, what was Island 2020? Island was the first season of the South Korean survival reality show that aired in 2020 with the goal of forming a global boy group. The program, created by Belift Lab, a joint venture between CJ, ENM, and Hive, was broadcast on Mnet and resulted in the formation of ENG. The concept of Island was built around two contrasting settings. On one side, there was Island itself, a futuristic, large, and eye-catching facility where the most outstanding participants lived, those with the greatest chances of debuting. On the other side was the ground, a smaller space without dorms, where the so-called weaker contestants trained, though in reality, it wasn't as bad as it was portrayed. The dynamic constantly pitted both groups against each other, and depending on their performance in the missions, contestants could move up to Island or be sent to the ground. This mechanic made every mission extremely tense. The broadcast ran from June to September 2020, and in the end, the 7 trainees selected to debut as ENG were Heeseung, Jae, Jake, Sunghoon, Sanu, Youngwon, and Nikki. The program starts with the arrival of the participants, some in groups and others alone, facing their very first test. Each trainee had to introduce themselves by singing and dancing in front of their peers, who, at the end, raised their hands to decide whether they deserved to enter Island. If they received 12 or more votes, they went into Island. Otherwise, they were sent straight to the ground. It's at this point where the main protagonists of the narrative began to stand out. Among them, Heeseung, who for me was the undeniable center of the story. From the very beginning, he caught the attention of both the producers and his peers, many of whom already knew him and considered him an ace. With his first performance, it was clear that he practically had a guaranteed spot in the debut group. However, he wasn't free from controversy. One of the trainees, Ganu, didn't vote for him, arguing that Heeseung didn't meet his expectations. This marked the beginning of the tense moments that would accompany the show. After the first selection, participants were divided between Island and the ground, and they were given their first mission, to perform the theme song into the Island. The song had 12 parts, some more appealing than others. For example, Part 1 as the chorus center, while Part 12 only had a single line. Here the trainees had to distribute the parts among themselves, choose a leader, and prepare the performance on their own. Meanwhile, those in the ground recorded a video to be evaluated by the producers and replace anyone eliminated from Island. And it was right here, in the very first mission, that the first conflicts emerged. In my opinion, this dynamic was designed with a touch of malice. It was obvious that dividing song parts, deciding who would be leader, and carrying the weight of a debut would spark clashes. Think about the context. Teenagers fighting for their future, in a high-pressure reality show, within a culture where age and hierarchy matter, and everyone wanting to shine with the best parts. To me, This was one of the main triggers of the tensions. The way the program was structured inevitably provoked discomfort, arguments, and conflict. The first mission made it clear what the central conflict of the narrative would be: the tense relationship between Kay and Heeseung. Heeseung was appointed leader and took part 1, although at first he was reluctant. But soon, some teammates, including Nikki and Kay, began to show discontent with his leadership. Nikki, for example, wanted that center part, while Kay also had the ambition to take that role, although he didn't express it openly. This is where, in my opinion, things were mishandled. Instead of confronting him directly, the group began talking behind his back, more like gossip than constructive dialogue. When they finally told him, the way they did it was far from ideal, and it only created more tension. Heeseung ended up giving his spot and leadership to Nikki. This was just the beginning of a complex dynamic between Kay and Heeseung. For many, the antagonist and the protagonist of a show. While Heeseung was perceived as a natural but reserved leader, Kay presented himself as someone strong, older, respected by his peers, but sometimes too blunt and authoritarian. The tension kept growing with each mission, and even Heeseung admitted at one point that he didn't feel comfortable sharing his opinion with Kay, that something inside him had broken after what happened in the first mission. Things reached a turning point when they finally ended up in the same group. After a heated confrontation, Heeseung and Youngwon told Kay they felt he was being too overbearing. That's when we saw a different side of Kay. He broke down, apologized, and showed his vulnerability. That moment was key in easing the tension and changing their relationship. I think what made them clash the most was that both were natural leaders, with very different personalities and under immense pressure. The show's editing amplified this rivalry, often portraying Kay in conflict and leaving out his positive moments. Another of the most memorable moments of the show was when Nikki voted against his friend Taki. This scene heavily shaped the narrative and the image created around him. Throughout the show, Nikki often appeared in tense situations with a serious or even upset expression, reinforcing a more negative perception of his role. I admit that the first time I watched Island, when I was 16, I was left with a bitter impression of him. But now, revisiting it, I see it differently. We can't forget that Nikki was only 14 years old. He was far from his family, in a foreign country, learning a new language, and fighting to achieve his dream. At that age, it's hard to handle emotions and conflicts maturely, especially in such a psychologically demanding environment. I don't think Nikki was a villain at all, but rather a teenager trapped in a very difficult context. And the editing didn't help him either. The scene of him voting against Taki was clearly manipulated to make him look worse than it really was. On a more positive note, and leaving the conflicts aside for a moment, I think one of the most beautiful aspects of the show was the relationships that were formed. Although Island is remembered as one of the most conflictive survival shows, it was also a place where genuine friendships and very strong bonds were born. The affection among the boys is undeniable. Despite the clashes, at the end of the day, they were all living the same experience, sharing joys and frustrations. Following this warmer line, something I noticed the second time I watched Island was that there was a group of boys who seemed to carry the narrative spotlight. They weren't necessarily all the ones who debuted, but they were the ones given the best parts, considered the most talented by production, and who almost always stayed in Island. This made them form a strong group that set the course of the program, for better or for worse. One relationship that surprised me upon rewatching the program was between Jake, Sung-hoon, and Heeseung. I hadn't remembered how close the three of them were. They supported and looked after one another, and there was a lot of mutual respect. Youngwon was also part of the circle sometimes. These dynamics showed a much more human and brotherly side to the competition. And although I haven't mentioned them as much, I also want to highlight the ground trainees. Maybe they weren't as relevant to the main narrative, but they did manage to convey a special sense of camaraderie. Among them, there was complicity and a strong sense of unity. They encouraged each other to improve and to earn a spot in Island, showing a fighting spirit that also left memorable moments. And so we arrive at the grand finale. That moment when the winners were revealed showed, on the faces of all the participants, the true essence of what Island was. It wasn't just about who debuted and who didn't, but about everything they had lived together. Days and nights of practice, constant effort, moments of frustration, and also of joy. Beyond the clashes and conflicts, what became clear is that they all shared the same dream and the same struggle. Those who debuted carried not only their own effort, but also that of those who were left behind, along with the memory of companionship and all the emotions they went through along the way. To close the chapter on Island and the story of its participants, it's important to look at what happened afterward. Some of the most notable contestants managed to continue pursuing their dreams and debut as musical artists. Among them, EJ, Nicholas, Kei, and Taki debuted together under HYBE's Japanese subsidiary, YX Labels, in the group and team, after once again participating in a survival show and audition. Both programs shared a similar format, but the main difference lay in their approach. And audition demonstrated how a show of this kind should have been done. The missions, groups, and songs were assigned beforehand, creating an atmosphere of teamwork and support among the participants. Moreover, there was no malicious editing, allowing the show to maintain a healthy tone, with natural tensions, but without the intentional drama or sensationalism from the production. Since both projects came from the same company, it's hard not to think that this is how Island should have been from the start. On the other hand, it's also impossible to ignore the bitter taste that Island left even among the winners themselves. They have admitted on several occasions that it's a period they don't like to remember. Recently, some members shared that during the filming they stayed awake for more than 30 hours, dealing with performances, eliminations, and interviews without rest. They also revealed that the environment was extremely tough. Eliminated contestants had to perform again even after knowing their fate, and their phones were taken away, completely isolating them from the outside world. One of them even described the show as hell, explaining that there was only one tablet connected to Net's Wi-Fi, which he secretly used to check online reactions. These statements clearly show how poorly the show was handled in terms of production, especially regarding the treatment of the participants. It's even more concerning when considering that most of them were very young and were experiencing such intense pressure for the first time. Finally, we can't overlook the relationship that was formed after the show and the debut of both groups. Through their interactions and joint content, and even collaborations, we've been able to see how they've moved past any tensions that may have existed. Now they're colleagues who share genuine affection and respect for each other. In the end, Island was an experiment in emotions, personalities, and human dynamics under pressure. We saw how conflicts and personality clashes don't necessarily define someone, and how bonds and solidarity can emerge even in the middle of intense competition. What remains, after everything, is not just the winners, but the full story of each participant. Their mistakes, their efforts, their moments of vulnerability, and their connections.